Presenting the latest in the award-winning King's Quest series. From the still active mind of aging Roberta Williams III, latest in the award-winning Roberta Williams series. What happens when Old Man Graham and his family are kicked out of Daventry Condo Association? You'll meet the fabulous Bernoulli brothers, Professor C.D. Romberg, and of course Rumpelstiltskin, over 12 gigabytes in length.
I'm puzzled by the list of supported platforms. No Mac and no Linux, particularly with Steam machines only a few months out from the King's Quest launch? And history has shown us that console gamers haven't been interested in adventure games. Sure, in this day and age there's no reason not to support consoles, but by that same token, there's no good reason to ignore Mac and Linux. And even more baffling is the complete absence of mobile support, where gamers have shown more willingness to try different genres.
The style of story and a little deeper, richer kind of thing that we had evolved into didn't fit very well with the console players at that time. And in fact, I'd say even now, like I know Ron just went off to do mobile stuff, that the exception to what these guys were saying about these big games is that right now the mobile space feels a lot like what we were doing back then. There's a lot more room for creativity.
And even more, there is a huge potential market of hidden object gamers that might like adventure games.
But over the last few years, the evolution of hidden object games has been astounding. They basically took over where the old point-and-click adventure games left off. Essentially, imagine Monkey Island, except some of the puzzles are find all the hidden objects in this room, instead of figure out what doodad goes where to make some ridiculous thing happen. That's basically the state of modern hidden object games. I mean, hidden object games sell more than Madden, and they certainly reach a larger audience.
Because I was in the casual game industry for about 8 years. And every time I tried to put more and more story in it and more adventure game elements. Like I think we were probably one of the first that had inventory in a hidden object game, topic choices for dialogue and things like that. So I was able to sort of baby step towards being a true light adventure game. First of all, it is a really big market. I mean, Big Fish pumps out like one a day or something, and it's an 80% female market. It's 35 plus, so that's exciting to me as a designer because I know that market would love Gabriel Knight.
My personal experience has been that every person I thought of that might like this game, who has never heard of King's Quest or adventure games, couldn't play it. And while on the side topic of non-gameplay technicals, the game needs skippable dialogue and save games. Skippable dialogue, come on, it's 2015, I don't need to explain this. And save games, autosave's fine, but particularly in a game that progresses, has branching paths and consequences, which are all great things. You should respect the time of players who want to experience everything without always restarting from the beginning. I'm always surprised by people who want graphics to go back to pixel art like the originals. First, let's be clear, I have no nostalgia for pixel graphics. We always wanted better graphics. Our consoles were always magnitudes behind current arcades, and we hated it. And we wanted our games to look just like Sierra's hand-painted original source art, not pixelated, dithered stuff we actually got. However, distinct from pixel graphics, given high enough resolution, I do like sprite graphics very much. So I can relate to the debate between sprite animation versus 3D polygon engines, and I could be swayed either way. By the way, Sierra did call their games 3D. King's Quest 2015 went with a 3D engine, but using non-photorealistic rendering techniques to give it a painted look. I'm happy with the idea in principle. This may sound harsh, but when I look at the game, I see more 2005 than 2015, especially talking about a game that targeted consoles and desktop. This is the curse of 3D graphics. It gets outdated so fast. I'm not saying the graphics are bad, but I really wanted to be awed by the graphics. Montage time! Here's a look at some semi-recent games, first 2D sprite, then 3D, that awed me the first time I saw them. What can be achieved today with traditional animation techniques is stunning, so it's no longer obvious which to prefer. Or their cartoony look. Imagine King's Quest VII or Larry 7 today. Now let's switch to 3D games that also use stylized art. It is worth noting that Wind Waker originally shipped for the GameCube in 2002. Trine, like King's Quest, also follows the magical fairy tale storybook theme. The current poster child of cel shading, Guilty Gear XRD. Yes, you are looking at 3D meshes, not sprites. Overall, I like the approach King's Quest took, but there were things nagging me throughout the game. I'm not exactly sure what it was, so I asked some of my friends. The consensus is that the art is inconsistent, which brings down the feeling of production quality. The unnatural way the animals look and move. One friend said old people and young people look like two different species, as if there are two different artists or art styles. Same goes with the dragon and how the flat shading doesn't seem to be from the same world as the cave. But I don't want to be overly negative. Graham and his cape look great, and I absolutely love the forest environments. One of the jaw-dropping things I felt when Doom was released was that you could look out a window, and in the distance you could see an area you could go to and interact with. When I first saw the backgrounds in King's Quest V, like the island, I wanted to explore every nook and cranny of the mountain. But it was just a static painting, and the game wouldn't let me explore it. The compelling promise of Doom was that this was possible. And now, 20-some years later, walking into Daventry for the first time. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Wow, this makes my nipples hard.
And I love the water. If this were a cutscene, I would just stare at it. But instead, the QTE obstructs my view and makes me stare at the ceiling to shoot
A crummy piece of rope.
We've already discussed Fake Challenge in this review, so I want to avoid repeating myself, but ultimately Fake Challenge is the problem with QTEs. Since many Sierra games used to include arcade sequences, I feel I need to discuss this. As somebody who likes arcade games, I personally have no problem with interesting and challenging arcade sequences. However, just doing a little research in Sierra's history will show that many adventure gamers hated arcade sequences and felt like they were being punished.
Were you guys the very first to have an arcade sequence in one of the adventure games like this?
I believe we were. Over whether or not that's good or bad as far as having those things. I know that they were very frustrating for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's and if you've seen any of our interviews or if you've Twittered with me or done anything on Facebook, you've seen that we've had this. I had a lot of discussion about stuff like that with people, and we came to realize, and we offered play arounds on it in Space Quest 4. It took us a long time to realize that we were penalizing people who, although a lot of people play both adventure and arcade games, some people who played adventure games did not like arcade games, didn't want to mess with hand-eye coordination, and didn't, as purists, think that belonged in the games.
Simply put, these sequences need to be optional. Otherwise, you're inflicting the same kind of pain on people that many more of us successfully complained about with gambling sequences. Yeah, I went there. It's the same thing. And now you've made your design problem worse. You now have to understand two completely different types of challenge. And as much as I personally enjoy interesting and challenging arcade sequences well integrated into an adventure game, considering that the notion of challenge is not well understood for adventure games, I prefer those resources be focused on perfecting the adventure game aspects. Back to QTEs, you now have the worst of both worlds. Particularly for console gamers, the QTEs are child's play compared to what they normally play, and will find these unchallenging and boring. Meanwhile, the adventure game purists will still resent being forced to play these. And if the only reason is to avoid having a cutscene, frankly, this is just wallpapering over a structural design flaw. And one final thing, for the number of deaths that these open up, I got the same generic death messages way too often. Sierra! Deaths! Come on, go crazy with it! There's a legacy to uphold!
There it is. Good old dirt. Smells like dirt. Tastes like dirt. This may just be your most humiliating moment ever, although it's hard to tell. There have been so many.
I've played the game over 5 times now, and I couldn't remember any songs, with the exception of some vague recollection of the King's Quest V main medley. I had to go back and find music. Then, in the opening QTE sequence, I realized that the majority of the interesting musical moments were used only to drive the pre-scripted moments and events in the game. I am unable to express how disappointed and sad this makes me due to Sierra's pioneer status in video game music. While I can't recall anything from this game I just played, I can recall a lot of songs from 25 years ago. So to make a point, I've weaved Sierra music throughout this entire review, and to further drive the point, not just any Sierra music, but King's Quest music. Sierra was the first to bring professional musicians to the video game industry. Sierra understood how powerful music could be in expressing characteristics and emotions far beyond the reach of graphics and text. In addition to their iconic title songs, they were notorious for giving specific characters and locations their own memorable and catchy theme songs, which implicitly underscored the importance of making the normal, playable moments of the game interesting. And here underscores the mistake, the story trap. Returning to what's become the central theme, story versus interactivity, the King's Quest 2015 music is only interested in reinforcing all the fake, linear, pre-scripted dramatic points, rather than helping create the story with the player. Game designer, wanting to score dramatic pre-scripted moments does not absolve you from creating interesting music for the majority of the game. And if you're going to be obsessed with cueing music for dramatic moments, then in addition to scoring for the main game, you should be using dynamic music. Ugh. Now you've forced me to talk about LucasArts in a Sierra review.
Now you've done it. You've really done it.
Nearly a quarter century ago, the people at LucasArts were frustrated by this exact same problem, that the music system wouldn't bend to serve the player's action. So for Monkey Island 2, they invented their interactive or dynamic music system, iMuse. A dynamic music system can seamlessly transition between different parts of songs, change instruments, change tempo, and play special things on cue with the player's action. So now with music, like story, it can follow the player instead of the player being forcibly led. In the plain example, notice how the music changes as the character moves to different places. Though iMuse was originally intended for adventure games, LucasArts expanded it to other titles. Personally, I felt TIE Fighter was their pinnacle and really opened my eyes about how powerful interactive music could be. It went beyond immersing me in the game. It was like growing a sixth sense, or more fittingly, it was like using the Force. From just the music, I could sense the entire situation of the battlefield. Did Imperial or Rebel ships just jump in? Fighters or capital ships? Are enemy ships within combat range? Did I uncover the Emperor's secret objective? Did I lose an important ship? So given the rich musical heritage that King's Quest 2015 descends from, I am saddened and disappointed by the lack of ambition here. Conventional categories don't let me say everything that needs to be said, and I did want to take a moment to praise King's Quest 2015 for some things, and I think it deserves huge credit for capturing the tone or spirit of King's Quest. It captures that weird and wonderful balance of whimsy, seriousness, compassion, sadness, daring-do, mysticism, and wonder. It is obvious the developers did their homework on King's Quest trivia and lore. I was surprised and impressed they were trying so hard to stay with the canon of the originals. Because reboots so often throw everything away, I was fully willing to accept that coming in, so I consider this a pleasant surprise. And I find their approach to go deep and expand on the original lore very interesting, as with the well and the dragon. And I love the pocket trope jokes.
Not so fast, Pocket Boy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pockets.
It's not broken. It's endearing. Don't ever fix this. And thank you for letting me do this. And this.
Save me! Save me!
Yeah, not my finest moments, but it's so cathartic. And it's not like I put a hamster in a microwave. Don't judge me. But I do want to bring up 3 quick quibbles. 1.
I'm pissed. Don't be a garbage mouth. This is a family game.
I want to escape to the magical world of Daventry, not be reminded of the real world. Slang, accents,
Merci.
and the huge borrowing from The Princess Bride really kills it for me. This is King's Quest. It can stand on its own. 2. The distinction between brains, brawn, and heart is a contrivance. The designers have stated that in King's Quest 2015, all of Graham's decisions are still technically heroic and not evil. Fair enough. But particularly in classic King's Quest, I never felt that compassion was a separate choice. It was baked into what you did. You go around helping people. That's what you do. 3. This one doesn't really bother me much, but some have stated they don't like klutzy or whiny Graham. We've had no shortage of inept heroes with Sierra games, so I can understand the sentiment that we shouldn't convert Graham. But overall, the designers have shown great reverence and love for the series, and have done a wonderful job capturing the feel of King's Quest. Well done, odd gentlemen. If I seemed overly harsh towards King's Quest 2015 in this review, it is not because I dislike the game. In fact, far from it. There are many appealing things about this game, and it is probably my favorite modern adventure game to date. And I have no problem thinking of it as a King's Quest game. The team that put this together is clearly talented and showed reverence for the original source material. But any crotchiness you may have sensed is not about whether the game was bad, nor some overbearing nostalgia fixation that demands nothing changes, but it's about realizing the full potential and improving things far beyond what we had decades ago. While King's Quest 2015 avoided the worst aspects of Sierra games, it also fell short of living up to the greatest highs of Sierra games. This game asked little of me, so while entertaining the playthrough, very little of me was invested into the game. So after I'm done with this game, what will I remember about this game and take away from it? That might stay with me for another 20-some years, like its forebears. And after the nostalgia factor wears off, how many variations of use object A on B can we take before it becomes predictable and stale? I don't feel like there's enough here to sustain a full re-emergence of adventure games. While it may be a little unfair that King's Quest 2015 gets the brunt of this, since nobody has really cracked adventure game design, by holding up the King's Quest and Sierra names, this comparison's fair game. And as pointed out in this review, classic Sierra managed to get a lot more right than people give it credit for. And that's why we love those games. Namely, better intuition about the proper role of puzzles and its relationship to story, as well as embracing the role of challenge. I worry that modern designers have bought into 2 fatal conceits. 1, they have become paralyzed by the fear of dream logic and terrible puzzles, and they think this is the main problem of adventure games. But this misunderstands that dream logic is only a symptom of the problem, not the direct problem itself. The problem is the notion of challenge, and the industry has shown that it fears challenge as well. But unless adventure games figure out what challenge means for adventure games and embrace it instead of running away from it, I fear adventure games will continue to feel weak and conflicted, and thus never recover as a genre, and worse, further convince the industry that adventure games are commercially unviable. 2. I worry that modern designers will keep falling into the story trap, the fatal conceit that throwing traditional story techniques can be used as a crutch, replacement, or excuse for trivial superficial puzzles, that everything can be papered over with, using a Hollywood screenplay writer and celebrity voices, failing to understand the unique properties and differences of a game. These two conceits will only continue to result in tacked-on storytelling design, which players will ultimately sense subconsciously, and undermine the emotional connection a player can have with the game. Or stated differently, 19 years from now, for King's Quest's 50th anniversary, when the next reviewers look back at this game, after the graphics and other technologies become obsolete, what will they remember? What will they say? Was it merely just another game in the illustrious line? It further simplified the point-and-click interface of King's Quest VII, but made a lateral move to exchange mouse-click for gamepad press, and use commodity game engine technology available at the time. Or will they say King's Quest 2015 finally cracked the adventure game code and gave birth to a renaissance of adventure storytelling games that were able to touch people's lives? I fear is more likely the former than the latter. My hope in doing this review is that I get the ear of some present or future game designers, whether it be the Odd Gentleman or anybody else, and they may be able to take this and build upon these ideas and unlock the full potential of adventure games. And I still look forward to the day when I can once more play a game that gives me the same sense of wonder, amazement, and possibility as I first felt playing the original King's Quest.
Please forgive me. I don't know what I've done to deserve this pain. I try to help others in vain. No soul so solid, bereft of all things true, alone in sorrow.
Thank you so much for making it to the end. As always, comments are below. Here are some ideas. What was your favorite Sierra game moment? What Sierra puzzles did you feel made you step up and ask something of you? What was your favorite Sierra song? If you do not play classic Sierra games, do you now have an understanding of what we saw in those games? What do you think people will remember or say about King's Quest 2015 in 20 years?
Thank you for playing Space Quest 6. This is Gary Owens, signing off.